It is the end of a long week of soul searching for the Republican Party. And tonight, despite what you might be hearing, that Republican Party is close to unifying. Going into yesterday's meeting, the big face-to-face sit-down between Paul Ryan and Donald Trump, the dynamic was a big question mark. Those two men have had significant differences on policy and on the very question of what it means to be a Republican. Trump already told Chuck that everything is open to negotiation. And this morning on NBC's Today Show, Trump said all of his policies are just, quote, suggestions at this point, and that includes his proposed Muslim ban.
I think millions of people who voted for you across the country during the primary process felt as if you were actually proposing that. Are you softening your stance?
Well, I'm not the president right now, so anything I suggest is really a suggestion. And if I were president, I'd put in legislation and do what I have to do.
But would you put in legislation?
No, I'm looking at it very strongly. I'm not softening my stance at all, but I'm always flexible on issues. I am totally flexible on very, very many issues, and I think you have to be that way.
So, yes, there are stark differences between Ryan and Trump, but Trump is signaling that he is movable when it comes to policy. And coming out of Thursday's meeting, Ryan still isn't ready to endorse Trump, but now it is starting to feel more like a train that hasn't yet reached the station rather than a train that isn't coming at all.
Do you expect to endorse him?
Yeah, I think this is going in a positive direction, and I think this is a first very encouraging meeting. But again, in 45 minutes, you don't litigate all of the processes and all the issues and the principles that we are talking about.
And there are plenty who think he will get there. NBC's Luke Russert spoke exclusively today with the highest-ranking Republican woman in Congress, House Republican Conference Chair Cathy McMorris Rodgers.
I was encouraged. He listened. He expressed several times that he would like to work with us. I believe that we can unite around a belief that it can't be business as usual. It can't be status quo. And that's more than anything what Donald Trump represents. He represents that, he's coming here to be a disruptor. I believe that Paul Ryan is going to get there.
And the House Freedom Caucus, that's the conservative crowd that played a big role in pushing John Boehner out as Speaker. Well, they're showing signs of warming up to Donald Trump as well. Even Senator Lindsey Graham, who still hasn't backed Trump for president, says he had a cordial phone call with the man who once gave out his cell phone number on national television. Trump's path to the nomination wasn't actually very different from McCain's or Romney's in terms of their vote share when they clinched the nomination, and the task isn't impossible. Look at this, our new NBC SurveyMonkey national tracking poll. It shows Clinton ahead of Trump by just 5 points. Also this week, Quinnipiac shows the race close in 3 pivotal swing states. Clinton leads by a point in Florida and in Pennsylvania, and she trails by 4 in Ohio. Now, those polls could prove to be outliers. Time will tell. But for now, they're very encouraging to Republicans. Trump may not be the most conservative candidate they could find, but his flexibility just might make him viable for a win this fall. Just listen to John Boehner's latest take.
So why would Paul Ryan want his party taken over by somebody who's not a conservative?
Well, he may or may not. But the fact is, Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. And I think what Paul's trying to do is to help shape the direction of Trump's policies. Now, anybody that thinks that Donald Trump can't win, just watch.
A win is something for Republicans to get excited about. And if that sentiment keeps spreading in the party, then it will further quash whatever appetite there still is among Republicans to resist Donald Trump. Let's bring in Luke Russert, who grabbed that exclusive interview with Congresswoman McMorris Rodgers earlier today. He's tracking some of the Trump warm-up following his visit. So, Luke, you were saying this yesterday. We had you on the show. Paul Ryan, at the start of the week, this was huge news. He said he couldn't support at that point his party's nominee, now feeling like a bit of an island when it comes to Republican leaders.
Yeah, he's an outlier right now because McConnell is on board. The NRCC chairman, Greg Walden, is on board. The NRSC chairman, Roger Wicker, is on board. Those are the two men in charge of getting elected Republicans back into this building come election time. You also see the leadership of Cathy McMorris Rodgers, who I spoke to, and you're starting to sort of see this idea of, okay, Donald Trump may not be the person we thought we were going to be working with, but there is clearly somebody here that we can do business with. And by the way, he is kind of an empty suit when it comes to policy because he's never really been well versed in it. And maybe, just maybe, we could fill that suit with our own policy ideas and trust that he would put smart people around him. Maybe all of this that he's been doing on the campaign trail is just for show. One member suggested this to me, Scott Desjardins, an early Trump supporter who also happens to be a member of the Freedom Caucus. Take a listen to how he described it.
I think Donald Trump, of course, grew up in reality TV. I shouldn't say grew up, but was involved in reality TV. And when he campaigns, I think some of that comes out. If you meet him in private like Paul Ryan did, or I've had the opportunity to, he's a very serious guy, and he's much more policy-oriented. Plus, I think he's willing to learn.
So you're getting this sense that, well, behind closed doors, Donald Trump's a different guy. He's willing to learn. He's going to be somebody that we can work with. And it kind of brings to mind, Steve, what Bob Dole said, which is that they would never support Ted Cruz. And this is, by the way, a lot of other Republicans, John Boehner included, felt this way. Ted Cruz was so rigid and such an ideologue, they felt that it would be a disaster for him to be at the top of the ticket. He would not budge on any single issue. But Donald Trump, well, he said some incendiary things, like calling on a ban on Muslims entering the country, calling Mexicans coming across the border rapists, things that would tank any other politician. But they say, hey, if he's the nominee, we still think we can do business with him. That seems to be the conventional wisdom. Paul Ryan is the one holdout. I think he's protecting his own brand, his own future, and also I think he wants to extract some more concessions from Trump, or some more promises that he will focus on the role of Congress as being an equal part of the legislative branch, is equal to the executive branch. But I gotta say, I was a little surprised by how quickly there was, at least on the surface, unification this week on Capitol Hill when Trump came.
All right, Luke, I've got a couple of guests here for a panel. Before I introduce them, though, I'm going to skip ahead here for 1 second. Larry Kudlow's on set with me, Republican luminary Larry Kudlow. And he has a question for you. I want to hear what he has to say.
I used to do his show. It was a great show on CNBC. I miss Larry's show.
You know, Luke, I told him that, and he wouldn't believe me. It's like, what's up with this? Anyway, great report. Great to see you. What, in your interview with Kathy McMorris Rodgers, she's the first person to talk about disruptor. And I think she used the word outsider, but I know she used the word disruptor, and she said it's okay. We'll work with a disruptor. Now, that's what's going on here, as you well know. That's really Trump's whole message. I have not heard other Republicans welcome that, but maybe they're going to have to, and maybe they're learning.
McMorris Rodgers, coming from Washington State, right, a place that is very, very well known for its disruption, its technological disruption, the birthplace of Amazon, the birthplace of grunge music, right? Two things that completely disrupted what the status quo was. I think it's a very keen insight you have there, Larry, is that something that Republicans feel they can grab a hold of. Remember, the 2010 Republican Tea Party class, that was a political disruption if there ever was one. I mean, my goodness, that might be one of the biggest ones in history that I'm sure Professor Kornacki there can shed some light on. But maybe that's the ticket. Maybe it's, hey, this is what we started in 2010. There are some rough edges around it. Don't get us wrong. Let's try to make it better, and maybe that's the mantra we carry forward. But part of the folks that get caught up in that, I would say, are the Eric Canners, are the John Boehners, maybe Mitch McConnell, maybe Paul Ryan. So that's the sort of the line they have to walk, is how much disruption is possible.
All right, Luke and Larry, stand by for a second. Let me bring in the rest of the panel. We have Michael Steele with us. He's the former top aide to former House Speaker John Boehner, and fresh off her Road Warrior special, NBC's Casey Hunt. She's been covering all corners of the campaign trail for us. Michael, let me just ask you that comment we played from your former boss, from John Boehner. He wasn't with Trump in the primary. He says he's with him now despite the differences, and he says, if you don't think Donald Trump can win in November, think again. I know you weren't with Trump in the primaries. Do you agree with that sentiment, though?
I think that's entirely possible. I think that people are yearning for an outsider. They're yearning to break through the deadlock, the stalemate in Washington, D.C. You know, John Boehner, while everyone thinks of him as kind of a Chamber of Commerce standard issue Republican, he thinks of himself as a conservative rebel, came to Washington to disrupt the old order, and he's always kind of eager to see others do the same.
And Casey, you covered the Stop Trump movement. You covered them as they tried to pull out all the stops. Well, so what are you seeing right now? Now that they've lost, now that Trump's going to be the nominee, are you still seeing full-scale resistance from them, or are you seeing them make peace with this?
You are seeing some remnants. You're seeing them talk about Trump's tax returns, for example, making the argument that he should put out those tax returns before the general election. But I also think you're seeing some wait and see, because the whole party is grappling with what do we do? And you saw this, I think, with Paul Ryan, right? The question is, do we get to November and the demographics turn out to be destiny and Donald Trump is effectively winning or losing, excuse me, to Hillary Clinton in a landslide and the Republican Party needs to run away from him? I think many Republicans I talk to still feel like that's an open question. And I think that the never Trump forces are suffering from the same problem they've suffered from all the way along, which is they're not unified. They don't have a leader or a candidate to get behind. There were some rumblings about Mitt Romney, but so far that, of course, hasn't gone anywhere.
And you were saying at the start of that, basically, you know, whatever expression you used, it wasn't that big of a movement to begin. How would you describe the scale of that movement, even at its peak? How big was it that we were talking about?
It was small but noisy and splintered. And I do think that there were plenty of voters in the Republican Party. I mean, you saw it across the board. You had 16, 17 candidates, you know, going down at one at a time. Plenty of people voted for all of those other candidates, but no one was able to solidify or really stand up to Trump, show that they could be bigger than Donald Trump. And I think that's going to be the challenge for Hillary Clinton. Now, she has a lot of advantages that, you know, these Republican candidates didn't have. She, you know, her fame almost matches his, if not does match his. Obviously, her operation is ready to take on something of this scale. She's going to have the funding. She's got, you know, the fundamentals are on her side. I just think that there's still a lot of unpredictable. We don't know. Like what Michael Steele was saying was right in that regard.
Well, and you, I saw you shaking your head there.
Is Luke still here? Is Luke still here?
Yeah, you think he is?
Where's my man, Luke? All right, Luke, you're taking the temperature of these Republican leaders, and I want to take your temperature about their temperature. So let me just try this. Steve talked about the polling, the new polling, which is phenomenal. A lot of the national polls show Hillary and Trump even, within the error margin, okay? In Vegas terms, it's a push. And then we have these key swing state polls, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Again, essentially a push. The landslide argument for Hillary, I think, is evaporated. Trump's had tremendous strength here. So, Luke, are these GOPers falling in line because they see his voter political power? And the whole thing has changed, and these polls are game changers.
Well, I would say it's early for the polling, right? It's just May. There were some questions about the Quinnipiac polls that perhaps there was an oversample of likely voters. Perhaps they did not have a big enough minority share. But I do think, to what I said earlier, is there's this idea that perhaps there's something we can build on here with Donald Trump. The amount of votes that he's been able to get. Look, it's very rare that you have a Republican in a contested primary overwhelmingly win Massachusetts and then win Alabama. All right, so there's something there. There's something going on. How do we tap into that in a way that does not make the party an unwelcoming place for different types of people or for newer voters in the future? And that's what they're trying to figure out, which is he's tapped into something, he's blown up many, many years of conservative orthodoxy and of assumed beliefs within the conservative movement and within the Republican Party. So where is there an opportunity to build? So when you say falling in line, I think there's an idea of, okay, we may have not been right all these years. Perhaps there were some things that we mismanaged, and we perhaps were expecting our voters to come along with us on some of these things. And maybe that you try to repeal Obamacare 50 times in a row and it doesn't work, that you should focus on something else, that people feel left behind. I think that message has been heard loud and clear. But they realize the demographic changes that are on the horizon. Latinos are the fastest growing voting group. I think that's, how do you thread this needle? There's obviously a need for change, but how do we do it?
Real quick. To me right now, the politics of this race, Trump has tremendous momentum. And this is adding to it, this peacekeeping in Washington. Hillary Clinton has lost momentum almost on a daily basis. She can't put Bernie Sanders away. And in fact, he's got momentum in the Democratic Party. And I think that's a big change also.